Both men arrived at the same impossible instruction: you must die while still alive. Neville Goddard, standing before audiences in Los Angeles in the 1950s and 60s, declared without hesitation that the central task of human existence is to kill the false self, what he called the old man, and rise as pure I am, as God awake in human form. Decades later, Eckhart Tolle, sitting on a park bench in London in the wreckage of his own psyche, experienced that death firsthand, the collapse of the ego structure he had mistaken for himself, and emerged into what he would later describe as presence, as awareness untethered from thought. Two teachers, two vocabularies, one instruction: let the ego die so that the real you can live. And here is what almost no one notices. Both of them described the same obstacle standing in the way. Neville called it the old man, or the false self. Tolle called it the pain body. Different names for the same psychological structure, the accumulated story of who you think you are, built from memory, reinforced by repetition, and mistaken for reality. This episode is about the death that liberates. It's about the I am that remains when everything you thought you were falls away. And it's about the striking convergence between Neville Goddard's teaching on consciousness and Eckhart Tolle's teaching on presence, two rivers flowing from different landscapes that meet in the same ocean. Welcome to Neville Goddard Universe. I'm glad you're here, because what we're exploring today sits at the very heart of Neville's teaching, and at the heart of nearly every mystical tradition that has ever emerged on this planet. It's the teaching that consciousness is primary, that your sense of self creates your world, and that the transformation of that sense of self is not personal development. It is spiritual death and resurrection. Neville's entire body of work can be read as an extended meditation on one phrase: I am. Not, I am this or I am that, but the bare fact of being, the awareness that exists before any label is attached. He taught that this I am is God, and that every limitation you experience is the result of attaching the I am to something finite. I am poor. I am sick. I am unworthy. These are not descriptions of reality. They are acts of creation. You are binding infinity to a cage of words. Eckhart Tolle came to the same realization from a different direction. His language is the language of presence, of now, of the dissolution of the egoic mind. But strip away the vocabulary and you find the same teaching. The self you think you are is a construct, a fiction held together by thought, and the moment you see through it, really see through it, you step into the deathless awareness that was always there beneath the noise. This episode will map those two teachings onto one another. We'll look at Neville's concept of the old man and Tolle's concept of the pain body. We'll explore Neville's 1970 lecture, I am the resurrection, which is perhaps the clearest statement he ever gave of ego transcendence. And we'll walk through a practice, rooted in Neville, but enriched by Tolle's insights, for recognizing and releasing the I am not statements that keep the ego alive. And if this exploration speaks to something in you, if it feels like a homecoming to a truth you've always sensed but never quite articulated, then a like or a subscription would mean a great deal. It's how this work finds others who are ready for it, and I'm grateful for every mind that walks this path with us. Let's begin. Neville Goddard taught that the central spiritual act is the shift from I am something to I am. This is not semantics. It is the difference between being a limited, conditioned human personality and being God awake in human form. And Neville did not speak of this as metaphor. He meant it literally. The day will come, he said, when you will know from experience that you are God, not a part of God, not connected to God, not inspired by God. You are God, dreaming that you are a person, and the entire spiritual journey is the process of waking up within the dream. But here is the problem. You cannot wake up as long as you believe the dream character is real. Neville called this dream character the old man. It is the self you inherited, the bundle of beliefs, memories, reactions, and limitations that you were conditioned to accept as yourself. It is the voice in your head that says, I am not talented enough. I am not worthy of love. I am a victim of circumstances. It is the identity constructed from the past and projected into the future, and it feels utterly convincing because you have been rehearsing it your entire life. The old man is not you. It never was. But as long as you believe it is, you will continue to create from its assumptions, and your world will reflect those assumptions back to you. The world is yourself pushed out, Neville said, and if the self you are pushing out is the old man, the limited, conditioned, fear-based self, then limitation, conditioning, and fear will greet you everywhere you turn. So what is the solution? Neville's answer is ego death, not the death of the body, but the death of the false self. You must, as Paul wrote, put off the old man and put on the new man. And this is not a gradual process of self-improvement. It is a rupture. It is a dying. It is the moment when you stop identifying with the story of yourself and recognize that the awareness witnessing the story is what you actually are. Let me give you an example from one of Neville's own testimonies. He tells of a woman who came to him in despair. She was convinced she was unlovable. Every relationship she entered confirmed this belief, not because it was true, but because she was perpetually assuming it to be true, and assumption creates reality. Neville did not tell her to think positive thoughts. He did not tell her to affirm her worth. He told her to die. Die to the woman who believes she is unlovable. Stop breathing life into that identity. Let it collapse. And in its place, assume the feeling of being loved. Not as a future event, not as a wishful thought, but as present fact. Feel it now. Persist in that feeling until the old woman is gone and the new woman is all that remains. She did. And her world rearranged itself to match. This is Neville's teaching in its purest form. You are not transforming the person you think you are. You are killing that person and becoming someone else entirely. Or, more accurately, you are recognizing that the person you thought you were never existed in the first place. There is only I am. Everything else is costume. And here is the key. The old man does not go quietly. It will fight for its life because it believes it is your life. It will summon every memory of failure, every echo of past pain, every voice that ever told you who you are. Neville called this the former conversation. It is the inner dialogue that keeps the old identity alive. And it will not stop until you stop feeding it. In his 1970 lecture, I Am the Resurrection, Neville took this teaching to its apex. He spoke of the resurrection not as a future event or a historical miracle, but as a present psychological fact. I am the resurrection, he said. Not, I will be resurrected someday. Not, Christ will resurrect me. This awareness, this consciousness, am, the power that raises the dead. And the dead is the old man, the false self, the ego structure that must die so that God can live as you. Do you believe this? He asked his audience, echoing Jesus' question to Martha. Do you believe that you are the resurrection and the life? That you can die to any limitation and rise as the new man simply by assuming you are already what you want to be? Most people do not believe it. And that disbelief keeps them bound to the old identity, resurrecting it every morning with the same thoughts, the same feelings, the same story. But you are not most people. You are here because something in you knows the old man is not real. Something in you is ready to let it die. And that brings us to Eckhart Tolle. Because what Neville called the old man, Tolle described with such precision that it feels like he was reading Neville's lectures and translating them into the language of modern psychology. Eckhart Tolle did not set out to become a spiritual teacher. He set out to survive the collapse of his own mind. In his late 20s, living in London, Tolle was consumed by depression and anxiety so severe that one night he woke with the thought, I cannot live with myself any longer. And then, in the space between one breath and the next, a question arose. If I cannot live with myself, then who is the I and who is the self I cannot live with? The question shattered the structure. The ego, the self he had been calling I his entire life, was revealed as an object, not the subject. There was an awareness watching the self, and that awareness was not depressed, it was not anxious. It was simply present, simply aware, untouched by the story of Eckhart Tolle. He describes what happened next as a kind of inner dissolution, a falling into a void where there was no longer anyone suffering because there was no longer anyone to suffer. The person he had been, the accumulation of thoughts, memories, and emotional patterns, simply stopped being real, and what remained was presence, pure consciousness, the I am without content. Tolle would later write that the primary obstacle to this state of presence is what he calls the ego, not ego in the Freudian sense, but ego as the false self, the thought-made identity that believes it is who you are. And feeding that ego, sustaining it, is what Tolle calls the pain body. The pain body is the accumulated emotional residue of the past. Every hurt, every resentment, every moment of rejection or failure that the ego clings to as proof of its existence. It is the story you tell yourself about why you are broken, why you are limited, why you are a victim. And it is addicted to drama, to suffering, to anything that confirms the narrative it has been spinning for years. Sound familiar? This is Neville's old man in different words. It is the former conversation. It is the psychological structure built from past experience and projected as future limitation. It is the identity that must die if you are ever to know yourself as I am. Tolle writes, "The pain body is the shadow cast by the ego. It lives on your negative thoughts and emotions. It feeds on drama and thrives on identifying with suffering." And here is the crucial point. The pain body does not want to be healed. It wants to be right. It wants to perpetuate itself because it believes it is you. Neville said the same thing in his own way. He taught that the old man resists transformation because transformation is death. The conditioned self will offer you 1,000 reasons why you cannot change, why your desire is impossible, why you are not worthy. And every one of those reasons is the old man fighting for survival. Now, watch the convergence. Tolle teaches that the moment you become aware of the pain body, the moment you observe it as an object, rather than identifying with it as yourself, it begins to lose power. You are not the pain body. You are the awareness that sees the pain body. And in that recognition, the pain body cannot survive, because it only exists when you are unconscious of it. Neville taught the exact same principle. He said that the moment you recognize a limiting thought as just a thought, not a fact, the moment you see it as part of the old man's conversation rather than your true identity, it loses its grip. You step back into I am, into pure awareness, and the limitation dissolves. Both men are pointing to the same mechanism. Identification is the problem. You are not your thoughts. You are not your emotions. You are not the story you have been telling yourself. You are the consciousness in which all of those things appear. And the moment you know that, not as an idea, but as a living fact, you are free. Tolle writes, "The beginning of freedom is the realization that you are not the thinker. The moment you start watching the thinker, a higher level of consciousness becomes activated." Neville would say, "The moment you stop identifying as the man who is poor, sick, limited, or unworthy, and simply rest in I am, you become the power that creates worlds." This is where the two teachings converge most powerfully. Tolle's presence is Neville's I am. Tolle's ego is Neville's old man. And both teachers agree, the death of the false self is not a loss. It is liberation. Because what dies was never real. What remains is what you have always been. There is one more parallel worth noting here. Tolle speaks often of what he calls unconsciousness, the state of being so identified with thought that you are completely unaware of the present moment, of the now. Neville called this sleep. He said most people are asleep, dreaming that they are awake, moving through life in a state of total identification with the conditioned self. And the spiritual awakening is literally that. Waking up within the dream, recognizing that you are not the character in the dream, but the dreamer. "Awake, thou that sleepest," Neville would quote from Ephesians, "and arise from the dead, and Christ shall give thee light." The dead, he said, are those who are asleep to their true identity as God. And Christ is not a person outside of you. It is the awakened I am within you. Tolle would say, the now is Christ, presence is Christ. The awareness that is prior to thought is the light that illuminates the darkness of unconsciousness. Same teaching, same truth, different words. And here is why this convergence matters. You clicked on this episode because the thumbnail said, "Ego must die." And now you understand what that means. It is not dramatic self-destruction. It is not the loss of personality or individuality. It is the death of the false identity that has been blocking your awareness of who you really are. The ego must die so that I am can live. The old man must be crucified so that the new man can rise. The pain body must be seen for what it is, an echo of the past, not the truth of the present, so that presence can fill the space where suffering once lived. This is the teaching, and now, let's make it practical. Neville often said, try it. He did not want followers who believed him. He wanted practitioners who tested the teaching and proved it to themselves. And so this section is not theory, it is instruction. The practice we are going to walk through is simple but profound, learning to recognize when you are speaking as the old man, and consciously choosing to speak as I am instead. Here is the core principle. Every time you make a statement that begins with, I am not, you are reinforcing the ego, you are feeding the pain body. You are resurrecting the old man from the grave where he belongs. I am not confident, I am not successful, I am not loved, I am not enough. These statements feel true because you have repeated them so many times that they have hardened into belief. But they are not observations of reality. They are acts of creation. You are using the creative power of I am, the power that brought worlds into being, to limit yourself. And the world, which is yourself pushed out, reflects that limitation back to you as experience. So here is the practice. And I invite you to do this, not tomorrow, not later, but now, as you listen. First, bring to mind one area of your life where you feel stuck, limited, or lacking. It could be related to money, relationships, health, career, self-worth, whatever arises most readily. Now, listen to the inner conversation surrounding that area. What do you habitually say to yourself about it? What is the story you tell yourself when you think about this limitation? You will likely hear a sentence that begins with, I am not. Identify it clearly. Say it to yourself, silently or aloud. Let yourself feel its weight. For example, I am not capable of earning more money. Or, I am not the kind of person who attracts love easily. Good. You have just exposed the old man. You have just seen the pain body at work. Now, here is the second step, and this is where Tolle's teaching becomes invaluable. Do not fight the thought. Do not try to suppress it or argue with it. Simply observe it. Recognize it as a thought, not a fact. See it as part of the conditioned self, not your true identity. Tolle would say, you are not the thought. You are the awareness that is watching the thought arise. And in that recognition, the thought loses its hypnotic power. Neville would say, you are not the old man who believes this limitation. You are the I am that is dreaming the old man into existence. And you can stop dreaming him anytime you choose. Third step, make the deliberate shift. Drop the not. Return to I am. Instead of, I am not confident, simply say, I am. Feel it, not as words, but as a fact. You exist, you are aware, you are consciousness itself. That is the foundation. Everything else is costume. Now, add the quality you desire, not as something you will become in the future, but as something you are assuming now. I am confident. Say it. Feel it. Do not ask how it will happen or whether it is true. The old man asks those questions. The I am simply assumes. And here is the key. The feeling is the secret. Do not just repeat the words. Inhabit the state. Neville taught that assumption, to be effective, must harden into fact, and it only hardens when you feel it is real. So when you say, I am confident, allow yourself to feel what confidence feels like in your body. How do you stand? How do you breathe? What is the quality of your inner dialogue when you are confident? Live in that feeling for a few moments. Saturate yourself with it. And then release it. You do not need to carry it around like a mantra. You have planted the seed. Let it grow. This is the practice. And you can apply it to any I am not statement you discover. I am not worthy becomes I am worthy. I am not capable becomes I am capable. I am not loved becomes I am loved. Each time you make the shift, you are dying to the old man and rising as the new. Each time you are starving the pain body and feeding the presence. Each time you are choosing I am over the fiction of limitation. Now, one more layer, and this is where the practice deepens. Neville taught a technique he called revision, which is the deliberate reimagining of past events so that they conform to the ideal rather than the actual. If you have a memory that reinforces the old identity, a moment of rejection, failure, or humiliation that the pain body clings to, you can revise it. Close your eyes. Recall the memory, but do not replay it as it happened. Rewrite it. Imagine it unfolding in a way that reflects the new identity, the I am identity, rather than the old man. If you were rejected, imagine being embraced. If you failed, imagine succeeding. If you were humiliated, imagine being honored. This is not denial. This is creation. You are not changing the past. The past does not exist except as a memory in the present. You are changing the meaning you have assigned to that memory, and in doing so, you are freeing yourself from its grip. Tolle would call this releasing the pain body's fuel. The pain body feeds on old wounds. Revision heals those wounds imaginatively, and the pain body withers. Do this practice daily, morning and night if you can. Before sleep, in the state Neville called SATS, the state akin to sleep, where the conscious mind is quiet and the subconscious is open, review your inner conversation. Notice the I am not statements. Observe them without judgment. Then, consciously choose I am instead. Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Fall asleep in that assumption, and watch what happens. Not tomorrow necessarily, not even next week. But soon you will notice that the old conversation has quieted. The old identity has loosened. And the world around you will begin to shift, not because you have changed reality, but because you have changed the self that is creating reality. This is not magical thinking. This is the mechanics of consciousness. And both Neville and Tolle have handed you the same key. Let's step back now and ask a larger question. Why does this teaching keep appearing? Neville Goddard, a mystic and metaphysician rooted in the Christian esoteric tradition, taught ego death and the primacy of I am. Eckhart Tolle, drawing from Zen, Advaita Vedanta, and his own spontaneous awakening, taught the dissolution of the false self and the awakening to presence. And they are not alone. Ramana Maharshi taught self-inquiry, who am I? Not the body, not the thoughts, not the emotions, but the awareness that witnesses all of those. The I am. The Buddha taught the dissolution of the illusion of self, the recognition that what we call I is a construct with no inherent existence. What remains when the illusion falls is not nothing. It is awareness, unconditioned and free. Jesus said, "Before Abraham was, I am." He did not say, "Before Abraham was, I existed." He identified himself as the eternal present, the consciousness that is prior to time. Across centuries, across cultures, across traditions, the same teaching emerges. The self you think you are is not real. And the moment you recognize that, you step into something deathless, something that was never born and can never die. Why does this keep happening? Because it is true, not true as opinion, not true as belief, true as direct experience available to anyone who is willing to let the false self die. And here is the beautiful, liberating implication of that. You do not need to be special to experience this. You do not need to be enlightened, advanced, or spiritually gifted. You only need to be willing. Willing to observe your thoughts instead of believing them. Willing to question the story you have been telling yourself about who you are. Willing to assume, even for a moment, that you are not the old man, the pain body, the conditioned self, but the I am that is prior to all of that. Neville said, "Dare to assume you are what you want to be." Tolle said, "The moment you realize you are not present, you are present." Both are invitations to the same shift. And the reason this teaching matters, the reason you are watching this video, the reason something in you responded to the words, "Ego must die," is that you already know it is true. Not intellectually, deeper than that. You have felt the gap between who you really are and who you think you are. You have sensed the presence beneath the noise. You have touched, however briefly, the I am, and now, perhaps, you are ready to live there. This is what the convergence of Neville and Tolle reveals. Consciousness is not a doctrine. It is not the property of one teacher or one tradition. It is the ground of all experience, the substance of all reality, the only thing that has ever been true. And you are it. Not the you that worries, struggles, or doubts. Not the you that is defined by past or future, but the you that is aware of all of that. The you that is reading these words right now. The you that exists prior to thought, prior to identity, prior to story. That is the I am. That is presence. That is God awake as you. And the ego, the old man, the pain body, the false self, is simply the dream you have been dreaming. And dreams end when the dreamer wakes. So wake up. If this exploration has stirred something in you, if it has clarified what you already sensed but could not name, then I hope you will consider leaving a like or subscribing to the channel. It is how this work continues, and it is how others who are ready for this teaching will find it. I am grateful for every mind that walks this path with us. You came here because something told you the ego must die. And now you know, it is not a loss. It is a liberation. The false self dies so that the real self can live. The old man is crucified so that I am can rise. And that rising is not waiting for you in some distant future. It is available now, in this moment. The moment you stop identifying with the story and rest in the awareness that has been watching the story all along. Neville stood before audiences for decades and told them, with absolute certainty, "You are God. Not part of God, not a servant of God, God." The I am that spoke to Moses from the burning bush. The I am that raised Lazarus from the dead. The I am that said, "Let there be light," and there was light. That is what you are. And every limitation you experience is simply the result of forgetting that and identifying instead with the dream character who believes itself to be small, finite, and separate. Tolle sat on that park bench in London and discovered the same truth from the opposite direction. The self he thought he was dissolved, and what remained was not emptiness but fullness, not absence but presence. The awareness that is prior to thought, prior to time, prior to form. And in that awareness he found what Neville called I am, the eternal, unchanging ground of being. Tonight, before you sleep, try this. Let the old man die. Just for a moment. Let go of every story you have been telling yourself about who you are. Let go of the limitations, the fears, the "I am not" statements that have been running in the background of your mind for years. And simply rest in I am. Feel it. Not as words, but as presence. Not as concept, but as fact. You are. You exist. You are aware. That is the foundation. That is the truth. Everything else is negotiable.